Peer feedback content and standards competence levels in academic writing styles revision tasks. Are they crucial and critical for feedback perceptions and efficiency? Abstract. Peer feedback content is a core component for peer assessment, but the impact of various content of feedback is hardly studied. Participants in the study were 89 graduate students who were assigned to 4 experimental and controlled groups. Experimental groups are received and they receive a scenario with concise, general, elaborated, specific feedback by a HO, and competent peers, ESF by a high competent peer was perceived as a more adequate, but led into more negative frames during the treatment. Groups with a low competent peer outperformed groups with a high component. During the post-test, feedback, perceptions, and performance were uncorrelated. Peer feedback, peer assessment, feedback content, and perceptions in text revision. So what is it that influences students' peer feedback uptake? Relations between error tolerance, feedback tolerance, writing self-efficacy, and perceived language skills, and peer feedback processing. Highlights error and feedback. Tolerance contained emotional, cognitive, and metacognitive components. Components of error tolerance were related, and feedback of tolerance were in the components. Writing self-efficacy did not relate to peer feedback update. Error, tau, and feedback tolerance did not relate to feedbacks. And perceived language skills were related to the uptake of peer feedback writing skills. Abstract, this study investigated the extent to which the uptake pre-feedback of 10th grade students were at the N of 160, range 15-16, related to the intrapersonal feedback loops, and factors such as error, tolerance, and writing self-efficacy, and interpersonal factors such as feedback providers, language skills, and perceived by the feedback recipient. 2 groups of students received similar feedback on their writing performance provided by trained research assistants. Half of the students were led to believe that the feedback was provided by a peer who perceived the stronger language skills than their own, whereas the other half was led to believe that the feedback was provided by a peer perceived to have a weaker language tolerance error to related feedback tone. Perceived language skills of the feedback provider were related to the uptake of peer feedback of the writing skill that they presented. Error tolerance, feedback tolerance, and writing did not relate to peer feedback uptake. These results emphasize the central role of errors in peer feedback processing, as they imply that the importance of interpersonal factors should not be overlooked when producing the explanation. The authors and me investigated the relative contributing factors and the relative contribution of peer relations, family structure, and demographic variables in predicting loneliness in adolescence. 9th grade high school students N756 from 8 different schools representing various socioeconomic status in Ankara, Turkey. The family structure instrument author-constructed questionnaire involving demographic information and variables on peer relations. Results of multiple regression analysis indicates that all of these sets of variables account for approximately 41% of the variance in loneliness scores. Additionally, peer relations contribute 34% of their variance to the family structure's 14%. Not all practice makes perfect. Not all practice makes perfect. A writer who works in isolation will not improve significantly over time. Leveling up requires stepping outside of your comfort zone. Here's how you can go and do that through your peer critique of your work. One of my favorite things about writing is that as a craft is and is our art form. As writers, we can continue improving our basic skill set. In the days of modern publishing, it's one of the few aspects of the career control that we have. Setting aside time to write, putting the effort, trying new things. However, having spent over 10 years in this writing game, I can tell you what not to practice. All practice does not make perfect. A writer who works in boob is not in his or outside of his comfort zone. Today, I'm going to discuss how to do that via peer critique of your work. I've been an avid reader since childhood, but seriously didn't consider my writing skills to be fabulous until my 20s. I finally bit the bullet by signing up for an introduction into fiction writing and NIDA class. All the time, I've been blogging for a few years and I had authored a number of nonfiction articles. I figured that adapting these skills to fiction would be easy, but it wasn't. It was pretty bad. And that became clear after I wrote my first story and submitted it to the workshop by the class. Classmates were kind about it. And their feedback showed me that I had a long way to go. Ooh, in this case, you haven't participated in a writer's workshop. This is how it usually works. When it's your turn to get critiqued, you give a copy of your story to everyone in the group. They read it before the next meeting. When the group meets, they have a discussion about the story, including what they liked, what they didn't understand, and what they might need to improve. During this time, the author listens but does not respond. After everyone has had a turn to talk to them, the author thanks them for the critique and may briefly respond to the comments. One nice feature of this format is that it fosters an interactive discussion among those giving the critique, without the possibility of the author jumping in to make it confrontational. Another advantage of a group critique is that it provides several unique perspectives of the same exact story. Some of them might focus on the character development, others on the plot, and still others on the dialogue or the setting. As you get to know the other members of the in-group, you'll begin to recognize that the things they say are far. For example, one of my classmates had some script television writing experience, so he always liked to see plot twists. Another student paid the most attention to the vivid sensory detail, though the class and its nature of the next semester were better off without writing. So we did another student who was a joy to see. The peer critique played a vital part in that. If you take a swing at the writing class or join a critique groups, you're bound to level up as a writer. Anakastisa, what? Yeah, that's the feedback received in the very now and here, submissive and a larger story that you don't want to look into. So try writing a novel length work. If you give the me space a development for fantasy as a world, I tell you more intricate stories. The problem is that you go too far in the novel and it's too long to submit it to the writer's work group. So to get the feedback for something that long, you'd have to find another way to do it.